Hello and welcome. My name is Mr. Rafael and I've been a teacher for 8 years across 4 countries and in 7 schools, 3 of which were right here in England. So in this series, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about what to expect when teaching in England, so hopefully by the end of this series, you will definitely not immigrate and teach here. Because teaching in this country has been easily the worst experience of my life. I would rather check for landmines with a hammer than teach one more class in England. But this video isn't going to be some aimless rant about teaching in the UK. No, I've got an agenda. My goal is to convince my primary audience, international teachers thinking of moving to England, that doing so will be a massive mistake, one you'll pay for with your dignity, well-being, peace of mind, and time. It's like one of those intense moments where you can see a destructive force heading for an unsuspecting target, and you're in a unique position to warn them to avoid disaster. This video series is my warning. Because there's a very good reason why teachers are fleeing schools in England so frantically, with nearly half of teachers planning to quit by 2027 due to workload. You hear about teachers desperate to leave, with one teacher saying, "I am desperate to get out of education due to workload, constant monitoring and paperwork." Now, take a guess what the UK government's solution to this teacher shortage crisis is. You, international teachers. The Department of Education mulls boost to international recruitment. The government is looking at how it could boost schools' international recruitment to plug teacher gaps amid a deepening teacher supply crisis. In a presentation shared with the Department of Education's Recruitment and Retention Expert Advisory Group, seen by Test, officials revealed the Department of Education wants to discover how it can help schools boost efforts to recruit more overseas teachers, and is seeking advice from experts on how it could make that happen. They are after you, and I have to warn you. There's even an academy trust, which are when many schools are run by a single company known as a multi-academy trust, called the Harris Foundation, which has solved a lot of its teacher gaps with Jamaicans. Jamaican teachers ease Harris Federation's recruitment woes. The leading trust says it has hired more than 150 specialist teachers from the country in 5 years. One of the country's leading academy trusts flies staff on a 9,000-mile round trip to recruit specialist teachers from Jamaica. So Dan Moynihan, the chief executive of the Harris Foundation, said the recruitment crisis meant schools have to be creative to find quality teachers and people. We run really good schools, a good reputation, and we pay more than average. Each year, we recruit Jamaican teachers who are fantastic people, but we're having to do that because we can't find teachers here. Harris runs 3 webinar inductions that cover topics such as how to open an English bank account and find accommodation. Jamaican recruits who have been at the trust for 5 years or more also give advice. These webinar inductions definitely don't paint an accurate picture, but this series will, I promise you that. But you may wonder, what harm is there in recruiting from Jamaica? Well, human rights campaigner Professor Gus John wrote an article titled, "Jamaica Needs Teachers, Yet England Poaches Them and Classrooms Lie Empty. How can that be right?" England, meanwhile, has every right to operate in its own interest. It has never done otherwise, and will happily denude the former colony of its qualified and experienced teaching force, whom it played no part in schooling and training. But Jamaican teachers also have a job to do: nation building, educating the nation's youth, and equipping future leaders. Ultimately, my message is for international teachers, both those drawn to the UK for training and a fresh start, and those who have already landed here later in their careers, like myself. To all of you I say this: heed my warning. Escape English schools as quickly as possible. There is a wider, more fulfilling world for educators beyond these shores. Don't make the same mistake I made. That is my primary goal of this video, to alert you why you should not teach here. My second goal is to highlight the problems in the education system to inform the people of England of the underlying issues in your schools and why teachers are fleeing. Because you really should care about the teacher crisis, for a number of reasons. But one big one is that the UK government is trying to attract people to teaching by throwing money at them. And guess where that money comes from? Your taxes.
Now, a new report has suggested that bonuses should be given to teachers to help deal with a growing recruitment and retention crisis. This study has been carried out by the Education Policy Institute, which found that schools in England are struggling to attract and maintain science and maths teachers in particular.
Additionally, the Department of Education offers £10,000 relocation premium to attract overseas teachers. The Department for Education said the trial could support up to 400 people to relocate, meaning it would cost £4 million. As the teacher crisis worsens, your taxes will increase. So you should absolutely be invested because you are paying for it, and you should at least know what's causing this mass exodus. Spoiler alert, it's not the salary. At no point in this video will I blame low pay for why teachers like myself are quitting the professions by multitudes. And at the end of this video, I'll tell you what I think is the only solution to reversing the teacher crisis. So, in summary, I'll tell you the major challenges that are fueling the teacher crisis, effectively ringing the warning bell to international teachers to avoid England like the plague, and how I think the English education system could be fixed and the teacher crisis reversed. So this is ultimately going to be a constructive video detailing the cause, effect, and suggested solution to the dying education system in England. To accomplish this, I've divided this series into 4 episodes. The first 3 episodes will explore major challenges that you'll very likely encounter if you decide to play life on hard mode and immigrate to England. The first 2 being specific to teachers, and a third a general challenge. And the 4th episode will be how I think England could solve these problems. To help me make this case, I'll reference a series of sources and relay this information to you using the same in-text reference system I used in my 2 documentaries. One is a 3-part documentary on the COVID pandemic. The other is on the climate crisis. Link in the description. Here's how it works. I use a source. For example, in 2022, the Association of School and College Leaders conducted a survey where they asked 766 head teachers and principals across England the following question. Have you been experiencing difficulty in recruiting teachers? Only 5.4% reported no problem with teacher recruitment, meaning that 95% have been experiencing difficulty in recruiting teachers. You won't believe how difficult it is for schools to find teachers here. But none of these articles will surprise you by the end of this series. Now, hopefully you noticed the number in the top right corner as I showed that source. If you want to do your own research about anything I've said, and I encourage that you do that, you'll find my sources in the description. Just click the link that corresponds with the number on the screen, and voila, my sources. I'll be using this in-text reference system so you can investigate my claims as I make them, and so you can realize that the case I'm presenting here is not subjective. My experience will be the same as your experience.
It'll happen to you.
The reasons why I left teaching in England are very typical reasons and shared by thousands of teachers in the UK. Ultimately, I want you to have a well-informed and honest insight before making any reckless decisions like teaching in England.
Brother,
Now, I want to give you some background on my teaching experience because it's my international experience that cemented a lot of my position on this topic. So as I said a moment ago, I've been teaching high school for 8 years now, in 7 schools and in 4 countries: Australia, New Zealand, the United Arab Emirates, and England. And when I started my career as a teacher in 2017, I saw myself retiring in this profession. But on Friday the 13th of October 2023, I handed in my resignation. And then my wife made pies, mine saying I quit, her saying you quit, and we celebrated resigning from teaching forever. But significantly, my withdrawal from this career is based on one condition: whether or not I'm living in England. Because if I live in England, I will never stand before a classroom and teach again. If I emigrate to anywhere else, I'll be back to teaching like that. But right now, I would rather get kicked in the face by Bruce Lee than go 10 rounds with Rocky Marciano than teach in England again. I've seen and dealt with enough to know teaching secondary school in England is a massive mistake. With the introduction now complete, let's get right into it. Gather round, educators. The first reason why I quit teaching in England is because, drumroll please, Ofsted. Now, what is Ofsted? Ofsted stands for the Office for Standards in Education. It's a watchdog group that investigates school performance to inform parents which school to choose for their kids. They rank schools into 4 grades. Grade 1, the best, outstanding. Grade 2, good. Grade 3, requires improvement. And grade 4, the worst, inadequate. Now, normally this could be seen as a useful review of schools, like the safety rating on cars. A quick glance at the rating and you get a vibe about what the school is like and move on. But oh boy is Ofsted the most power-mad virus to plague schools. They have as much influence as the papacy back in feudal times. And schools are absolutely terrified of Ofsted inspections. Allow me to take a minute to explain exactly what schools are afraid of. Here's what happens. You get an Ofsted inspection that deems your school inadequate. This poor rating means a series of drastic interventions occur, starting with academization. If a school funded by the local authority is judged as inadequate by Ofsted, then it must become an academy. So an inadequate rating means that schools are basically under new management as an academy. And, like what happened to Lincoln Castle Academy, who were rated inadequate in 2022, the school receives a termination warning after inadequate Ofsted inspection. this could mean its funding is cut. This is because Ofsted's findings can indirectly lead to a reduction in your funding through the Department of Education. Think of it like this. If Gordon Ramsay goes to your Michelin-star restaurant with his camera crew and makes a whole episode exposing how disappointing your food and service is, later resulting in Michelin taking away your star, Gordon himself isn't taking your star away, but he indirectly is by exposing to everyone how poor your food and service is. Now, do you think they're going to fire the head chef or keep him? They'll probably find someone else. Likewise, do you think they'll keep the head teacher and senior leadership team, SLT, that ran the school during the inadequate inspection? Most likely not. The leadership will change, head teachers will lose their careers, reputations will be tarnished, and then it trickles down to staff. And before you say, that's a good thing, they clearly weren't running the school well to get rated inadequate, hold that thought until the end of this video and see if you still feel that. So, understandably, school staff don't want to lose their careers, their funding, they don't want their life's work reduced to a single word, inadequate. And they don't want their reputation and the reputation of the school to be dragged through the mud. So naturally, they're scared. They have so much to lose and become extremely desperate to impress the hell out of the Ofsted inspector, to spare themselves that fate. Which translates as schools jumping through hoops, bowing down to any demand flung out by Ofsted, and just overall pathetic pandering to the inspector in the hopes of receiving a decent rating. And all this Ofsted pandering has resulted in something very toxic in school leadership. Schools in chaos as head teachers hired and fired like football managers over inspections. The Institute for Public Policy Research warned teachers are being driven out of the profession by the stress caused by high-stakes Ofsted checks. Loic Menzies, a former teacher who wrote the report, said a football manager culture driven by one-dimensional judgments dominates our education system. And an article on TESS argues that we should scrap Ofsted grades to end football manager culture, says report. Ofsted inspection grades should be scrapped to prevent oversimplistic judgments resulting in brutal leadership changes that create a football manager culture in schools, according to a report published today. The Institute for Public Policy Research report says an over-reliance on punitive control is driving teachers out of the profession and distracting schools from responding to their community's needs.
Head teacher Farrell received Ofsted's lowest possible rating of inadequate.
You, what's your name?
The damning report
Jason. You're running my campaign. You get the out of here. What do you want? Out of here. I want to hear that bullshit. Hey, what'd you major in college?
Sports marketing.
Okay, you're running my campaign.
The result of this is that schools in England have moved far away from being places for young minds to flourish and instead have decided to bend and twist into hollow performances, sacrificing true learning on the altar of Ofsted inspection scores. Now, before I go into the main criteria Ofsted looks for in these inspections, I'm going to give you a recent example of Ofsted saying jump and schools in England rushing to make every student and every teacher shout, how high? If you're a teacher or student in England, you'll notice that around the start of term 2 this year, so early November 2023, there was a sudden and intense focus on attendance. I've got teacher friends all over England, and they all seem to notice this sudden focus on attendance too. Personally, in my last school, I saw lunchtime and after-school detentions for being late. Teachers are required to stand in corridors to keep students moving to make sure they attend their classes on time. The PA system announcing to students that the bell has gone and they've got 5 minutes to make it to class and their teachers will be waiting for them, so don't be late. Students being removed from lessons completely and receiving detention for being more than 5 minutes late to class.
Bruh.
At assemblies where members of the senior leadership team scold entire year groups on attendance. Ever wonder why schools just leapt on attendance with everything they've got? I don't. I know that all schools in England soiled themselves when Ofsted released an official post on educationinspection.blog.gov.uk. And this website is significant because this blog will look at the way Ofsted inspects education in schools and the further education and skills sector. So you better believe schools pay attention to this blog like a cat pays attention to a laser dot. So, what does it say? On the 16th of November 2023, they posted improving school attendance. But many factors are within schools' powers, and it is right to expect them to do all they reasonably can to achieve the highest possible attendance. If a school can demonstrate they are doing this, we will judge it favorably, even if its attendance numbers are lower than previously. Importantly, the school will need to demonstrate they are moving towards pre-pandemic levels of attendance or higher, even if they remain a distance away from their overall ambition. However, if a school is not doing all that can reasonably be expected, we may still have concerns. So that sudden focus on attendance, fueling all of those assemblies, the PA announcements, the stricter and stricter punishments for poor attendance, is almost certainly schools desperately aligning themselves with what Ofsted is looking for. Now, that is just a small example of Ofsted announcing they'll be focusing on a particular quality, and suddenly all the schools overemphasize that same quality. What a coincidence! In general, though, Ofsted looks at 4 things: quality of education, behavior and attitudes, personal development, and leadership and management. But Ofsted's main focus is something more abstract than attendance. Ofsted primarily focuses on progress. Since 2007, the former Department for Children, Schools and Families launched a pilot project called Making Good Progress. These offered schools a set of criteria, guidance, and exemplars for making judgments about pupils' progress in relation to national curriculum levels. Essentially, they were designed to support the accuracy of teachers' assessments and inform lesson planning. Sounds good, right? Why wouldn't they? If there's at least one thing you'd want to know about a school, it's whether or not progress is consistently being made. How could this one focus destroy the education experience for teachers and students? Well, how do you measure progress? Or more importantly, how does Ofsted measure progress? Test scores, quizzes, exams, surveys? No, with marking. Marking is the absolute priority in schools. And if you're not English, you're probably thinking by marking, I mean marking assessments, exams, tests, and all that, right? No, I mean literally marking their notes and answers in their exercise books. For context, here is how I would divide my duties as a teacher outside of England, and here is how I would divide my duties as a teacher inside of England. And if you teach in England, marking will be your primary focus. And here's what marking means in England. Students walk into a classroom, they answer a question said by the teacher in their exercise books, and then the teacher goes through their exercise books after class and marks how well the student answered the question. If needed, the teacher is expected to correct the punctuation, grammar, and spelling, just like primary school. And if they misspell a word, the teacher needs to underline it and write it down so the student can copy it 3 times. And all in different colors so they can stand out to Ofsted inspectors. So they can stand out to students, of course. In almost every case, I would make students answer questions for no reason other than to create something produced by students for me to mark. Because that's the school's marking policy. Student work must be marked regularly throughout the year. So teachers must create things to mark regularly throughout the year, beneficial or not. And this is a very time-consuming task, let me tell you. Remember this? Nearly half of teachers plan to quit by 2027 due to workload. This is what they're talking about. I used to teach 14 classes, roughly 30 kids in each class. So around 420 students total. Marking was expected 3 times a term, so once every 2 weeks for 6 terms. That's over 7,500 marking events in a single academic year. For context, while teaching in England, I've marked more student work in a single year than 5 years worth of teaching outside of England combined. And it was all unnecessary. Kids don't benefit from it at all. It's just a mountain of extra work that adds absolutely nothing to student education. This practice isn't based on helping students. Schools do it just to impress Ofsted. You can see a brief example of this marking practice in an ITV news clip titled, 1 in 5 teachers quitting in first 5 years.
Victoria Hewitt is one of thousands of teachers who've thought of leaving the profession after the pressures of the job became too much. Today's survey says the long hours, the workload and the funding shortfall are driving teachers like her out of the classroom.
What a waste of time. And if that teacher didn't write good effort here in that kid's book, she would get reprimanded. So like all teachers in England, they stay behind for hours to mark the notes of their students. Is it any surprise, therefore, that 2 in 5 UK teachers work 26 hours for free each week? Patrick Roach, the General Secretary of the Nasiwit Teaching Union, said, "It was shameful evidence that the government was relying on free labour rather than investing in schools and colleges. The fact that teachers are losing out on average by £15,000 a year in unpaid overtime is nothing less than daylight robbery," Roach said. In England, teaching is marking first and foremost. Actually teaching is an afterthought. Now, some of you might think, how can a teacher in England even mark a student's exercise book when they take it home with them every day? Bro, they don't. In England, students will keep their exercise books in the classroom of the subjects. Their maths exercise books stay in their math class. Their geography exercise books stay in their geography class, while the rest of the world will expect students to buy their own binder or something that can accommodate all of their subjects. In England, each student will be provided with their own exercise book by the school, and then store it somewhere in the class, usually a bucket or shelf. And it isn't a small number of books either, mind you. I had 14 classes, about 30 kids in each, so I had about 420 exercise books stored in my classroom. At the start of each lesson, I'd have to find each class's books, display them neatly on the desk for kids to collect, and then when the lesson was over, I'd have to return the books back to their spot and repeat the same procedure for the next class. If this sounds normal to you, you've probably only taught in England. But know that literally nobody else does this. Virtually all of Europe, Oceania, Asia, Africa, North America, and South America do not have their students keep their books at school, so teachers can collect them and mark them. According to an article by Dr. Alice Germain titled "Why Are Exercise Books Staying in Schools?", Dr. Germain writes the following. Here we finally come to the heart of the problem. The function of exercise books in England has little to do with students' learning, but a lot with Ofsted inspections. Exercise books are used by Ofsted inspectors, in addition to lesson observations, to assess teachers' teaching and students' learning. It appears that it is a disaster if some books are missing when Ofsted inspectors come, because it could affect their report negatively. That's why it's safer for schools if books remain in school. That they are in that way useless to students doesn't seem to bother the inspectors or the school staff. They all repeat the story that children in London cannot be trusted to take their books home, as if they were trying to convince themselves that there is a rationale behind the absurd habit dictated by Ofsted inspections. This practice is not part of education. It's an Ofsted kink. It's resulted in kids not even bringing pens to school, just phones. A Reddit post on r/Teaching UK has someone asking, do any schools expect students to bring their books to school anymore? You hear comments like, at my school they literally show up empty-handed. No pens, pencils, rulers, books, nothing. To make things worse, they need 3 colours of pen every lesson to follow school policies. We spend most of the lesson handing out pens, which they spend the rest of the lesson destroying and leaving in pieces on the floor. To their credit, some schools are trying to reduce marking by a lot. In an article by the Daily Mail, we read, schools are increasingly scrapping marking policies over fear the work is too much of a burden on staff. Many schools have now introduced self-checking, in which pupils mark their own or each other's work in class. Another method is for teachers to go through students' books to identify common mistakes and address them in the next lesson. Futile effort. Those schools will just get an Ofsted inspection, get a low rating for not demonstrating progress well enough, crap their pants, and then reissue relentless marking. But schools have no idea. They still think all this extra work is necessary, oblivious to the world's view of it. The marking of books does nothing for the kids. The fact every other country doesn't do this, and yet they still somehow produce better results than, oh, bloomin' hell, all our teachers are leaving England, should be a testament that all this extra workload is just Ofsted foreplay, and you should feel violated to participate in it. Try asking students if they use marking or find it useful. Like, do they actually review it? I bet they couldn't care less about the marking. They do it because the teacher tells them to. But in England, schools have Stockholm Syndrome and gaslight their own teachers. The amount of times I've questioned the point of marking only to be told, how else will they learn? Students must have regular feedback in their books every 3 weeks so Ofsted can, so the students can know how to improve. Just don't mention the fact that students never review this feedback or their notes. All these notes are worthless because after they write them, use different pens, glue things in, they never review them. It's only for senior leadership to gawk at during unannounced observations to prep for Ofsted. The students wrote those notes for Ofsted, not their education. Schools in England are factories that produce things that Ofsted likes. They're more akin to surface-level theatrical practices than an academic institution. The ultimate evidence that these notes are indeed worthless is best seen during test revisions. I used to prepare detailed revision lessons for my students prior to an exam. They'd see examples, take notes, draw diagrams, and glue things in. It was thorough revision. Everything they needed to know for the test. These kids were ready. Then they would take their exercise books with all those useful notes for the exam next lesson, and then keep them in the classroom. Who are they taking these notes for? Not me, not them. It's for an Ofsted inspector. And surprise, they don't do well on tests because they're not allowed to review their notes and make real progress because Ofsted wants their books to stay in school, so when they look through them, it can give the impression of real progress. So even genuinely useful revision notes for tests becomes worthless filler activities because it looks better for Ofsted that way. Teaching in England is stimulating Ofsted's fantasies, and it doesn't help in any way. The biggest testament is revision for tests, just a tool for senior management to check to make sure Ofsted would be pleased. What a colossal waste of time. Pure surface-level theatre. Now, this obsession with marking and progress shown in the books has resulted in something that was a major culture shock for me when I first moved to England. The lesson flow. In England, they bombard students with a ridiculous amount of tasks each lesson. Again, not because it helps them, but because it means there's more notes in their exercise books for the Ofsted inspector to look at, and Ofsted likes them notes thick. So the lesson flow in England is about 100 times heavier than usual because it needs to carry all these Ofsted tasks. And to make sure you put the lotion in the basket real good for Ofsted, you'll be observed, monitored, and checked on by the SLT relentlessly. Countless unannounced learning walks and book checks. Like, I have been observed more times in a single term teaching in England than my entire time teaching in Australia, New Zealand, and the UAE put together. It's relentless. Right now, I'm going to demonstrate what I mean by the lesson flow being ridiculously heavy by showing you a 3-minute clip of how a typical lesson in English schools flows. Bear in mind, this is a typical lesson. Nothing out of the ordinary here.
Today we're going to learn about erosion. Please write down the title and learning objective in your books. Task 1. What do you think erosion is? Please write down the question in your book and answer it. In blue pen only, please. Erosion is the wearing away of material. Write down this definition in your books. Now, erosion can impact the coast in many ways. Task 2. How do you think erosion can impact the coast? Blue pens only. Timmy, why are you writing in black pen? You can only write in blue. Good. Now everyone take out your green pens and let's peer mark your answer to that question. Who needs a green pen? Excellent. Now hand back your books and let's continue. Erosion can impact the coast in lots of ways. One significant way is through coastal retreat. Task 3. What do you think coastal retreat is? Write your definitions in your book in blue pen. Good. Coastal retreat is the rate that the coast moves inland. Please write down this definition in your book. Now, everyone take this picture handout and glue it in your books. Who needs a glue stick? Remember, I want these back. Task 4. Write down all the difference you can spot in each stage in your books. James, where is your blue pen? You're going to get me in so much trouble if you don't write in blue pen.
But sir, I had a blue pen in art, but my friend took it, and then when I got another pen, it exploded during lunch when Dennis pushed me.
What? I didn't do nothing but...
Sir, someone's at the door.
Sir, can I go fill my bottle up? I didn't get a chance during lunch because Alfie asked me to be the goalie and it took all of my time, sir. Oh, you're ignoring me. Whatever, that's fine.
Okay, class. I see lots of comparisons made with a photo. Good. This is the impact of coastal retreat and is caused by erosion. Task 5. What do you think erosion is? Please write down the question in your book and answer it. Good. Erosion is the breakdown of material. Please write down this definition in your book. Task 6. How do you think erosion breaks down material? Please write down the question in your book and answer it. Is everyone writing in blue pen? Please make sure you do. Good. Erosion breaks down material in 4 different ways. Abrasion, attrition, solution, and hydraulic action. Task 7. What do you think each type of erosion does to the coast? Please write down the question in your book and answer it. Good. Now pass it to your partner and let's mark our answers. Great job. Let's go through the 4 types of erosion, starting with abrasion. Abrasion is when material is scraped against surfaces and wears them away. Please write down this definition in your book. Good. Now we're out of time, so we will only do one more task before pack up. Task 8. How can abrasion erode a coast? Good. Now can everyone close their books and put them in the blue box, and I'll mark your answers to task 8 and correct any spelling and punctuation. Next lesson we'll look at the other types of erosion. Goodbye, class.
Ask yourself, why? Do all these tasks add anything? No. It just thickens their nose to arouse Ofsted. Nothing more, nothing less. The pen emphasis I showed in that clip is also very real. If you're wondering why, first, who's asking? If you're a teacher, student, or parent, it's because it helps students organize their notes and makes marking and feedback stand out. Studies show that color coordinating notes improves student productivity by 24,000%. But if you are an initiated member of the senior leadership team that knows who really runs the school, it's so I'm marking it stand out for Ofsted inspectors. We tell them we mark in green, so the inspector needs to see green. This makes it easier for them to notice. It also allows us to review teacher marking faster during one of our frequent book checks and learning walks. Gaslighting galore. Let me give you a practical example of this. The head teacher says this.
What we try and do at Harrop is give young people as many chances as possible. You won't see students being excluded. Why? Because we have a belief that it doesn't work, because just sitting at home all day would not change or start to adjust the attitude, because it's the attitude we've got to get to change the behaviours.
Under Mr. Goddard, the school strives never to expel a student.
The percentage of prisoners in jail who were excluded from school is massive. It's something like 80–85% of all inmates. I can't look myself in the eye when I do my tie-up and think that I can find somebody to that road.
But the reality is this. Exclude and you're not outstanding, Ofsted told heads. Ofsted inspectors have told schools that a single fixed-term exclusion will mean they cannot be judged to be outstanding, according to head teachers quoted in a new report. So last year, when a Year 9 boy went on a racist rant against me in front of the entire class, making fun of my background and my upbringing while the class laughed, I thought to myself, if there was ever a line, that kid just crossed it. This year, that kid is the Year 10 head boy. Why wasn't he excluded? You ask the senior leadership team, it's because they don't believe in exclusions and studies have shown it doesn't help. But the real reason is if they do exclude this kid, Ofsted will disqualify the school from ever being seen as outstanding. See how it works? Ofsted says schools need to demonstrate a particular quality, then the SLT rush to brainstorm how to best gaslight their school community into thinking all the drastic changes they're about to introduce to perform this particular quality are their own independent decisions based on careful consideration of studies and what is best for teachers, students, and parents. And word to the wise. Don't believe schools in England whenever they mention a study to back up their policies. It's Ofsted pandering repackaged as research-based sound practice. Now, time for a reality check. The English think their schools work like this. A student goes in, the teacher provides knowledge and equips them with the skills they need to pursue careers. They do tests, projects, and complete homework as a way to hone their skills. Then they graduate and the teacher feels fulfilled in teaching their student. But Ofsted has hijacked English schools. So here's what it's actually like. A student goes to school, the teachers use the student as a tool to tick a series of surface-level boxes so Ofsted gets impressed by the illusion of learning and might hopefully grant the school a higher Ofsted rating. Students answer questions in the exercise book so teachers can create marking to demonstrate progress for Ofsted. They do tests, projects, and homeworks to create data for Ofsted to see. The students graduate, and their teachers quit because the meaningless mountain of marking has crushed their spirits. Teaching in England reminds me of a scene from the 2014 film The Interview. In this scene, James Franco's character questions the quality of life experienced in North Korea. In response, the North Korean representative assures Franco that the quality of life is great and provides evidence which convinces Franco.
Oh, wow! It's a grocery store. Looks like the Whole Foods around the corner from my place.
Yep, guess no one's hungry here after all.
Look at that fat kid! Hi, little fatty! Hi!
We have many fat children in North Korea.
It is later revealed that there was never any substance to this evidence. It was just for show. No nutrition to it at all. Likewise, in England, schools have no nutrition. They are factories that produce things Ofsted likes, and all the fat kids in groceries are fake, meant to trick an Ofsted inspector. But now is the time for the big revelation about Ofsted. Ofsted, despite being the authority on what it takes for schools in England to excel and for students to flourish, are incredibly